Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sam Darden. If you guys are new, make sure you like, subscribe, and leave a friendly comment down below. And I'm going to get to this video. It's called Three True Scary Stories of Real Killers featuring Being Scared. Let's do this.
What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing?
Shut the fuck up!
What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? Please,
The human brain is a Pandora's box we can only begin to understand. However, some people are born with a natural propensity to harm others. Some even take pleasure in it. Odds are you've come across someone like this in your life. Maybe you didn't even know it. Or is there a killer in you? Today I'm joined with Being Scared to bring you 3 allegedly true stories of real killers. If you enjoy his narration, you can check out his channel in the description. And if you have encountered a killer in your life, or have a scary experience of your own you would like to share, well, don't hold back on me. I tell scary stories, and if you have one, I want to know about it. So be sure to send it my way. Let's begin. Number 1.
Oh my gosh. Hey, quit doing that.
I want to start off by saying that this story is 100% true, and that I have linked an article pertaining to the case. Back in 2011, my family and I went to visit a family friend named Mike at his trailer out in the middle of nowhere, Alaska. It was during the summer, so the weather was nice and sunny. No snow to speak of. I was around 14 at the time, and I remember being particularly excited because Mike had a few ATV four-wheelers that my siblings and I would get to drive around to explore the expanse of the land. We met his son Blair, who was a little older than my siblings and I, maybe in his early 20s. He seemed decent, though back then I remember thinking that I wouldn't get to hang out with him if not for my brother and sister being there with me. We all hopped on our ATVs and drove out to explore the land, weaving through the forest and out onto a dirt path. Blair took us to a small ice cream shop nearby and bought us all milkshakes. After this, I started to relax around him. The day ended with us returning to Mike's trailer and roasting dinner over the campfire. Everything was great, and I thoroughly enjoyed the trip. We went home later that night. Then a few weeks later we saw Mike on the news. Blair had killed him and stuffed his body under the trailer. It was reported that Mike had been stabbed several times in the chest, and that Blair took a picture of his dead father and sent it to a family member, who then contacted the police. When my father told me about what happened, I felt a shiver run down my spine. Blair was a murderer. I couldn't believe that my siblings and I spent an entire day with a soon-to-be killer, laughing and enjoying ourselves, not knowing what he was capable of. Number 2.
This isn't my own encounter, but my mother's experience from when she was around 19 to 21 years old. My mother was almost a victim of a creepy rapist serial killer, Baby Man, who preferably uses axes as his signature weapon. She lived alone in a small unit in Richmond, Melbourne, and worked night shifts at a restaurant. Because she worked nights, she would sleep during the day and wake up around 2 to 3 p.m. She had a friend who visited her place regularly around the time she woke up, and they would eat a meal together and hang out for a couple hours. This was a part of my mom's daily routine. One night, my mom was at the laundromat alone, and she noticed a smallish, young, European or Middle Eastern macho-looking man. unloading a washing machine full of baby clothes, like a huge amount of baby clothes. To my mom, the whole scene looked out of place. The guy didn't seem right. His demeanor didn't fit the load of baby clothing he was hauling into his basket. The man looked over at my mom, stared at her, but my mom mentioned that she didn't think much about it at the time. She left shortly after with her load and drove back to her unit. A couple of weeks later, my mom finished her shift at work and drove back to her place, went to bed, woke up the next day in the afternoon, and soon heard a knock at her front door. Assuming it was her friend, she started walking down the hallway where you could see a frosted window at the end. She saw a smallish figure, the exact size as her friend, and didn't have any thought that it could be someone other than who she expected. My mom said that when she was halfway down the hallway, her body suddenly stopped in its tracks, and an immediate overwhelming feeling of crippling fear came over her. She was frozen and staring at the shape of the figure outside for a minute when an unknown voice said something like, "Hey, come open the door, it's me." My mom slowly walked back down the hallway and into her bedroom. She waited in her room for the unknown visitor to leave, but he didn't. Every couple minutes he would say things like, "Come on, let me in. I know you're in there. Why don't you open the door?" According to my mom, she waited in her room for maybe 2 hours, listening to the stranger calling out to her. She couldn't call anyone because the phone was in her kitchen, and she didn't have the bravery to leave her room, as the unit was tiny and easily accessible. She was afraid the person outside would hear her and find a way to get inside. She mentioned that after waiting for so long, she couldn't handle the cold temperature of her room, as she was barely wearing anything. Note, she had only been sleeping beforehand. She finally got the guts to jump up and bolt from her room to the kitchen, which had a back door. She ran out the back door and down the street behind her unit. She had a neighbor who she was friends with and went straight to their place. She explained what happened, and they both looked out this person's window, which had a view of my mom's unit. Since their street was in a U shape, they could see the stranger still standing at the front of my mom's door. It was the same man from the laundromat a few weeks earlier. They called the police, but the man left before anyone came. After the incident, my mom stayed at her parents' house for a few days. Soon, she felt that she was safe to go live in her own unit again. A couple weeks after moving back to her unit, she begins receiving notes and letters under her door and on her front steps. According to my mom, the letters had strange things written on them. She never told me what exactly was written, but she mentioned that the sentences and words were extremely amateur, as if written by a 6-year-old. Letters were squiggly, written back to front, and arranged in strange sequences. My mom would give the notes into the police station. They weren't treated as much of a threat. This continued for maybe a few weeks or a month. One day, my mom woke up in the afternoon after a previous night shift. It was just another regular day, but she felt that she needed to go and spend a night at her parents' house. She left, spent the night, and got a call the next day to find that the strange man from the first incident had returned to her unit around the same time she left, made his way to the back of her unit with an axe, and immediately started axing down her back door like a madman. He was seen by a neighbor who called the police. However, the man left before the police came. Anyway, it turned out that the man's description, partnered with the strange notes my mom was receiving, fit the policeman's belief that the man was a suspect of the rape and murder of a number of girls in Melbourne from the 70s onwards. He wasn't caught, and I don't know if he ever was. he's most likely still out there.
Number 3. This story is told from the point of view of a female. This is a story I've been sitting on for a long time, mostly because it makes me realize that it's not over yet. The clock is slowly ticking until the time comes when he is free. And while I hope he's long since forgotten me, something tells me he hasn't. I should back up. This happened in 1999, when I was a sophomore in high school and 14 years old. I had just moved back to America from the Middle East, where I spent about 5 or 6 years. Because of the standard of dress there, and the fact that my old school had uniforms, and I had no social life, I didn't own a t-shirt, let alone a pair of jeans. Every day I went to school wearing a long dress or a long skirt, with my mousy blonde hair tied back, with a scarf like a headband. I was awkward, mousy, and had a hard time making friends. This was a couple of years before 9/11, but in my little town there was still animosity towards anyone different. And with my British accent, and the fact of where I grew up, I was pretty different. I only had 3 friends, Joe, Nathan, and Kenny. Joe lived on my bus route, though he was way out in the middle of the country, so he and his 2 younger brothers were always the first on the bus in the morning, and the last off the bus in the evening. Our day always followed the same schedule. I would get on the bus, go sit next to Joe, and we'd talk for a little bit until we got to school. Then we would hang out with Nathan and Kenny for a bit and go to our separate classes. I was in advanced placement classes, and they were in the regular ones, so I didn't share any with them. But every other day our lunches coincided, so the 4 of us would get to eat together. Then, in the evenings, Kenny and Nathan would get picked up, and Joe and I would take the bus home. I don't really remember how we started dating. I think Joe told me that he liked me, and I said that I liked him back. And then our routine would change ever so slightly, and that we would start holding hands on the bus and at lunchtime, while Kenny and Nathan teased us relentlessly. It was so innocent, even for 14. Joe was sweet and thoughtful, and completely non-threatening. He was the type to always make sure you had the better half of something. Always the first to offer his coat when you're cold, and always pulling out chairs and holding doors open. A real gentleman. This went on for weeks, though it stayed strictly at school. We weren't able to see each other outside of school because he always had to go straight home, or his mother would be furious. Sometimes he would come to school with bruises, but he always said it was from roughhousing with his brothers, and I didn't really have a reason to doubt him. Then one day, there was an upcoming half-day from school. Joe suggested that he come over my place, and we could have our first afternoon together. We were both excited. He would take the bus to my stop, and then either walk or my parents would drive him home later. It was going to be great. I was beside myself with excitement. Everything went smoothly until the actual half-day. One of his brothers had found out about his plan and told his mother. She then called up to the school, apparently shrieking like a banshee and demanding that he come home not a minute late, or he would be in a world of hurt. He told me at my stop that he would go home, talk to her, and then be back as soon as he could, even if he had to walk. I was worried, but he kissed my cheek and said everything would be all right, and that he would be there in an hour or so. So I went inside and waited, and when I finally got tired of waiting inside, I went out with my dog and waited. I thought about calling him, but the one time I tried that before, his mother had spewed a bunch of venom at me for daring to call their house, and the idea made me cringe, so I just waited. Eventually the sun went down, and he never showed up, and never called. I was disappointed, but I decided it was probably for the best, and went about my evening as usual. The next morning, when I got on the bus for school, the bus driver looked at me and suddenly started sobbing. I thought that was odd, but it was kind of a dreary day in general, so maybe I was reading too much into it. I started heading for the back of the school bus and noticed that Joe wasn't there. Neither were his 2 brothers. That was odd, I was starting to get worried, but I thought that maybe their mother had taken them to school herself that day. The bus route went along as normal for a while, until we came to a heavily forested area, where the driver pulled over. She was shaking and crying, and just not acting like herself. Almost immediately, I looked out the window and see 3 policemen walking up to the bus. Apparently they had pulled up behind her. She talks to them for a moment, and then one of them leads her off. The other takes the wheel, and the third comes and sits by me. Neat. I get to sit next to an officer, I thought. And then I thought that I was in trouble, especially since there were so many other open seats. But he was very nice, and we chatted about school and life until we got to the campus. Then both of the remaining officers followed us inside and went into the office. I went to meet up with the boys where I usually did, but Joe wasn't there either. Neither of them had seen him. We just hoped that he was okay and went about our morning. In first period, I received a page to come to the office immediately. I thought it was about some scholarships I had been working on, but I thought it was weird they pulled me out of class. When I got there, the principal, the counselor, and the police were all there. I suddenly felt like a caged rabbit. And then, they told me what happened. The night before, when Joe got home, he had told his mother that he was coming to see me, and that was final. Obviously, they argued about it. She grounded him, and it came to blows. I found out later that his mother had been very abusive to Joe, which doesn't excuse what happened, but it does add some understanding, at least to me. After the confrontation was over, he laid in bed all night planning on what he would do. He decided that he was going to wait for his brothers to go to the school bus and hang back, telling them that he would drive himself to school, which wasn't too far out of the ordinary. Once they were gone, he would take a butcher knife from the kitchen and finish his argument with his mother once and for all. The next morning, everything went as planned for the most part. He got his brothers up and dressed and out for school, and watched until they were at the end of the long driveway to wait for the bus. Then, while his mother was sleeping, he went into her room and stabbed her multiple times. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, the gloomy weather was causing troubles with the bus. I don't know the details, but I know that it was a few minutes late starting its route. One thing I realized while writing this, and that Hollywood seems to miss half of the time, is that when you stab someone while they're sleeping, they tend to wake up, and she did. She screamed and tried to fight back, but he was too determined and too strong. Since the bus was running late, the brothers were still standing on the side of the road, waiting when they heard the screaming. They both turned and ran back to try to help. They tried to defend their mother, but Joe turned on them, slicing one of them across the palms and the other in the gut. Then he ran. When the bus arrived, she saw one of the brothers staggering up the driveway, covered in blood. In her panic, she kept going and called the police. Eventually, he made it to the corner store, a little ways away. Some stories say he crawled there, but I can't really confirm that, nor do I really want to. After the police finished questioning me, I was sent home. I remember lying on my parents' bed, staring at the TV while live coverage of his capture played. Or maybe it was a repeat. I don't remember. But I do remember seeing the news chopper filming as the police helicopter followed after Joe as he ran across the field. There was a cop perched out the door and braced on one of the landing struts. As the chopper got lower, he jumped out and tackled him. That was the last time I ever saw Joe. The part that creeps me out though was what happened afterwards. He pled guilty and was sentenced to 40 years for the murder and 20 for the assault on his brother. Not long after, the letters started. I never kept any, but they were long, crazy ramblings about how we would be together forever, how he did it for me, and how he truly loved me, and he would do anything to be with me. No regret, no remorse. He was happy about what he did, if it meant I was his. We moved a while later, and the letters stopped. I'm happily married now, and getting on with my life, but every time I think about him, I remember he's up for parole in 2020. What happens when he gets out? What happens if he comes looking for me?
Here's something pet owners can relate to.
There's always a reason to be afraid.
So if you guys love this video, please give me a thumbs up, like, subscribe, and comment down below what other videos I should react to. I want to go and react to another video. Give me a friend comment. Make sure you leave a subscribe. Make sure you turn your post notification bells on. Leave a thumbs up and comment down below. Thank you guys for watching this awesome video. Happy Monday. I hope you guys have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you guys for watching this awesome video. Have a great day, guys. Bye.